Hello, my name's Jackie Carter. I'm the EDI Disability Academic Lead at the University of Manchester, and I've set up a series of in-conversation pieces called Let's Talk Disability. The reason for this is that I want people who have a disability and who work and study at the University of Manchester to have opportunity to share what their lived experience, their everyday experience is with somebody in a position of influence, a senior leader at the university. So each episode will feature 2 guests, and each of those guests will have a conversation about what it means to have a disability at the University of Manchester. And at the end of the conversation, each will commit to one action, we're calling them one things, where they will take away something from the conversation that they've had and do something with it. I hope you enjoy listening, and we'll make, of course, the transcripts available for everybody. Thank you. Okay, welcome to episode 4 of the Let's Talk Disability series. I'm Jackie Carter. I'm the EDI Disability Academic Lead for the University of Manchester, and I have 2 guests in the studio with me today who are going to introduce themselves, and we're going to have a conversation about the lived experience of disability at the University of Manchester. So Hamied, can I start by asking you to introduce yourself, please?
Well, hello, Jackie and Nancy. So it's wonderful to be here. My name is Hamied Haroon. I'm a research fellow in the Faculty of Biology, Medicine and Health in the School of Health Sciences. I work on biomedical MR imaging and love the subject I do. I've always been disabled all of my life, and I'm a proud Mancunian. I've always lived in Manchester. I love this city. So I started life as a disabled child in a special school just full of disabled children, surrounded by that environment, and not really seeing other kids who were non-disabled around me. It was just a disability, but we learnt how to make the best of being disabled and the strength that gave us for the rest of life. But it was only when I got that lucky chance to go to the only mainstream high school that was accessible in Manchester at the time did I discover science. And brilliant programs, Nancy, you might remember these, Tomorrow's World, Star Trek, great things like that on TV, really kind of built that passion, that drive towards science for me. And so I found my path. Over to you, Nancy.
So thank you. I'm Nancy Rothwell. I'm President and Vice Chancellor of the University, a post I've held for 14 years, but still a scientist at heart in the same faculty as Hamied, in the Faculty of Biology, Medicine and Health, and still dip in and out of research, which is on stroke and dementia and brain injury. I do want to say, first of all, thank you so much both to Jackie and to Hamied, because I believe you were the founder of the Disabled Network, which has gone from strength to strength. And I think now is gaining real recognition. People are starting to think about what disability means in a way that we probably didn't even a few years ago. So I wanted to say a big thank you to both of you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Nancy. And that really is the purpose of this recorded series, to hear the voices of the lived experience, the everyday experience of disabled staff and postgraduate research students in the first instance, and find out not just what the challenges are, because we can talk about those, but also what the strengths of having a diverse community at the University of Manchester is. So Hamied, Nancy's mentioned the Disabled Staff Network. I don't know if that's a good starting point for you to say a bit more about what you've done at Manchester and what that has led to.
So that's a pretty awesome starting point. So when I finished my PhD and I became a member of staff, I was really lucky to fall into a research position at that time. So becoming a member of staff, all the support I had from DAS at that time was only for disabled students. So I lost all of that as a member of staff. It all just disappeared. So we were brought together, those members of staff who had, I hate this word, but declared that we were disabled. Because I don't believe we should have to declare or disclose it. Sounds like we're criminals of some kind to do that. But all the staff who had declared were brought together for the Disability Equality Statement or scheme that the university had to put together at that time. And so there's a small group of us, and that's where we started our network, the Disabled Staff Network. And the first thing we campaigned for was to have support for disabled staff alongside what was already there. We didn't want it to be in HR. We didn't want it to be anything to do with occupational health, although they're lovely people. But we wanted something that sat alongside the expertise that was already there in the university. So I had a one-to-one meeting with your predecessor, Professor Alan Gilbert, and I was so nervous that day. And I presented this SWOT analysis around the experiences of disabled staff. And he got it that we really were, that there was this gap in having support for disabled staff. So very soon after that, we had that put in place at the university, probably one of the first universities in the country to do that. And that meant a great deal in terms of the university's perspectives around disability and the change that brought around for disabled staff. And because of that, so many more disabled staff actually, if you like, in inverted commas, came out and actually shared that they were disabled, that they were neurodivergent, or they had some kind of long-term health conditions that impacted them on a day-to-day basis, and the support that they needed. They came out because there was a benefit to doing that, and that was the support that the university provided. So it's been a great journey since then. And as you might remember, we had a national conference here, Nancy.
I do remember.
Back in 2014 it was, where we brought disabled staff together from across the country on the only sunny day in Manchester that year in the great Alan Turing building. We launched our National Association of Disabled Staff Networks from there. And we've been going from strength to strength from that, all based on what we were doing here in Manchester.
Yeah, it makes me feel very proud, although we still have a lot to do. I remember Alan talking to us as the senior leadership team at the time about his conversation with you, and that's when we changed DAS to include staff. And actually, we've just expanded it again, not least thanks to the campaigning of Jackie, and to have more of a focus on PGRs, because they felt a little bit left out, because they didn't quite consider themselves as students, but they weren't necessarily members of staff. So that's expanded again. Interesting comment you made about declare, because there is still, my sense, among some people, a stigma about saying I'm disabled. I mean, sometimes it is very obvious, but sometimes it isn't obvious, and people feel it might disadvantage them to say I have a disability. So I think one of the things we have to do is give people confidence that they won't be disadvantaged by saying I have a disability. And it was very interesting when I met with the PGRs that one of them said, well, I can't see DAS because although I know I have a disability, it hasn't been formally diagnosed. And the head of DAS said, no problem. Come and see us anyway. It doesn't matter. And they were quite surprised. So clearly, from that meeting, the key thing that came to me was, as is so often the case, communication is not as good as it could be. We're not reaching enough people. And so they're thinking I'm isolated, I'm alone, I'm struggling. They don't all know about the network. I'm sure there's many more who could join. They don't know about DAS. They don't know about what can be done. But then communicating to others, because several of them were saying what brilliant PhD supervisors they had, but others saying, but my PhD supervisor just doesn't really understand what it means to me, and we need a bit more training. So I think awareness and communication is a big thing that we need to step up.
Yeah, I'm so glad you picked that up, because we, on episode 2, I think, of this series, we had the Vice President for Research, Colette Fagan, talking to Laura, who's the co-chair of the Disabled Staff Network, but also the co-chair of the PGR Disabled Staff Network, Disabled PGR Network. And one of the things that we picked up from that was about not just better communication, but better information that can be given
What's available
to PhD supervisors. So already, as a result of having those conversations and bringing that to your attention, Nancy, but also to Colette, we're starting to make changes in terms of what's delivered in the PGR supervisors toolkit. And moreover, we're sort of starting to spread the word more widely about what it means to have a disabled PGR student in terms of supervision. So it feels like it's not just the communication, but the it's hearts and minds as well, isn't it? It's getting involved.
I think it's also demonstrating that disability, which affects people in very different ways, sometimes profoundly, doesn't have to be a disadvantage.
Yeah.
I'm very proud that one of our heads of school for many years was completely blind. I found that hard to imagine how you could do that, but he did. And he did a very good job. And it was a great message to people. You can be a top academic, a professor, and a head of department, and be fully blind. And the people around him who knew him helped him a lot. And I met a student a few years ago who was remarkable. She was blind and deaf and studying music. And it was just, and actually that's one of the reasons why we should celebrate having a high proportion of disabled people, because it's humbling for the rest of us, actually. It makes us think, my goodness, I thought I had it tough. But actually, some of the hurdles people like you, Hamied, and others have overcome make you stop and think, actually, I've had it quite easy, really. So I think it's just good to see people around who, in spite of sometimes significant disability, have achieved great things.
Yeah, I think that's so important in terms of being able to see yourself, seeing people who are disabled like yourself in those high positions, in those positions of influence. Like you said, it was a head of department who was blind. When I found out about them and what they had accomplished, I think it was in computer science.
It was Robert Stevens.
Yeah, I was just like amazed that somebody of that level was a disabled person. So to be able to see that means a great deal to us. And I think we need more role models. We need that playing out in more senior
But it also makes people stop and think. I remember when Robert was at a head of department's meeting once, and there were slides, and I suddenly thought, oh my goodness, we haven't sent slides through to Robert in advance. You just need to stop and think that had he got them in advance, they would have been translated into Braille and he could have seen them. But of course, he couldn't see any of them. And afterwards, I had to write and apologise, saying we should have remembered that and we didn't. Because it's not at the forefront of your memory. And then the minute I saw him, I knew straight away that we'd made that mistake. Or just thinking about having a meeting in a building that isn't that accessible. I mean, we learned from the PGR meeting that although I think we're within the law, that doesn't mean we're within what's really needed in terms of access. Some buildings are pretty hard.
Do you have any thoughts on that in particular? I do have a question, but I wondered if you wanted to respond to that in terms of accessibility of estates.
So some of the buildings, Nancy, on our campus included, some of our new buildings even, you come to the entrance and already there's this feeling that you're segregated from everybody else. You go to a building, you go to the entrance, there's an entrance that everybody else can use, and then there's a disabled access entrance on the side. And often you are separated from everybody else. Even if you're going along with your students or with colleagues and you're having a conversation, and they can use that for want of a better word, the normal entrance, and you've got to go around the side to a different entrance. You are separated. You lose that conversation. You lose whatever is going on in that space. You become excluded from that. So it's something that I feel very strongly about. That the design of our buildings, yes, they meet the minimum legal standards, but actually we should be moving beyond that.
I have a question. I should know the answer to this. But on the design teams for buildings, do we have any disabled staff or DAS members advising?
Well, we're supposed to.
Okay.
We do have members of staff. So Kathy Bradley is one of those people that tries to get involved with all of the conversations. But in terms of design of new buildings, in fact, one of the things that Kathy and I have talked about is ensuring there is a disabled member of staff in terms of the redesign of the Reynolds building, for instance.
Okay.
So
that
we know about redesign. We're trying to get in on the conversation.
You know about this building now. It's going to be redesigned, so here's another one we need. Because, I don't think it's anybody wanting to be difficult.
No.
They just don't think in the same way I didn't think about Robert needed the slides in advance until it's too late. Or you turn up at a committee and you look around and you think, there's 20 people on this committee and I'm the only woman. I can't tell you how many times I have to pull out and say, this is not a very diverse appointments committee, either in terms of ethnicity or disability or even gender still. And people go, oh my goodness, and they're shocked when they realise, they've just overlooked it.
So can I prompt you both to think about, we've talked a lot about visible disabilities, where it's clear that somebody has a disability. But I'm really proud that the University of Manchester has adopted the Sunflower Lanyard scheme, which is all about hidden disabilities. So what do you think are the challenges for us? And also what can we do to sort of better communicate what it means to have, like myself, I have hidden disabilities. I have hearing impairment and I'm very dizzy all the time because of a neurological condition I had during lockdown. What can we do for hidden disabilities and for those people who are neurodivergent and wouldn't necessarily want to share that they have what's labelled a disability but might not want to sort of talk about that?
So, first of all, I don't like the disabled, non-disabled. For most of us, there is a spectrum, whether it's, slight dizziness or severe dizziness or neurodiversity. There's a whole spectrum of behaviours that don't define you as, I am disabled. So I think we have to get people to want to say, to feel they have an advantage by saying it, by wearing a lanyard. And until they realise there's something that will help them, why would they bother? Why would they want to stand out and say, put their hand up and say, actually, I've got a problem. So there's got to be something, and that means other people recognising it. I mean, I do wonder how many staff in the university would recognise that lanyard, because I think quite a lot would not, or not particularly see it, because they just say, oh, they're nice flowers. So I think it is an awareness thing, but unless we can demonstrate, look, if you wear that, or if you tell us, then help is available. You don't have to take it if you don't want to, but there will be no disadvantage to telling us, and there could be advantages. So I think approaching it from that individual's perspective as to what they could get out of it is probably a good way forwards.
That's really wise. Hamied, I was thinking, you mentioned earlier the National Association for Disabled Staff Networks, but you failed to say that you are the chair of that. Okay, so I wonder if there's anything that you can bring in terms of your sort of wider experience, thinking about disability across higher education, that perhaps would benefit Manchester.
Yeah, so in higher education and the academic experience, there's this whole kind of notion around what an ideal academic is meant to be, as you will know yourself.
Oh, yes.
So you're supposed, you'll only succeed, for example, if you're white or you're a man or you have no caring responsibilities or you don't need to go to the toilet or you can conference anytime and you're available 24 hours a day. Basically, you have nothing else going on in your life except for that academic kind of side of things. Also playing out there is the social model of disability, which is that it's not. So this is something that really kind of liberated me, if you like, is finding out about this idea around disability that actually, so the medical model says that we're the problem. We need to be fixed. There's something wrong with us. We're abnormal. We're handicapped. Hate those words. But actually, the social model of disability makes us think very differently, that actually the problem is society, not just in the physical barriers that we encounter, but also in the stigma, in those stereotypes, the attitudes, the negative things, where people are just left out because communication, as you said, is not in the right format. Sign language was not used by the government, for instance, during COVID. In the briefings that we had every day, a whole section of society was excluded from those because of that. So the social model of disability is saying, actually, it's those things that make us disabled. And so in that way, we are disabled people, which I like. Am I kind of going wrong?
Yeah, no, that's great. And I was wondering, given that you work across the sector, so you're hosted at Manchester and you're very involved at Manchester, but you have a sector-wide perspective of disability because of your chair of the National Association for Disabled Staff Networks, whether or not there's anything that perhaps we've missed a trick, we need to do more of.
Yeah, what can we learn from others?
Leader in this area. We've got the Disability Confident Leader status. We have amazing academic leads in all protected characteristic spaces, but what could we be doing in disability particularly that would help even more amplify what we're doing now?
So I think when it comes to EDI, equality, diversity, inclusion, I think we're missing accessibility from the conversations. And I think gender and race have these charter marks in the sector around Athena Swan, the race equality charter mark. As Jackie just said, that the disability confidence scheme is something now universities are going for. We have an award at this university. And that's good to take that step. But there's still a big gap when it comes to disabilities. So whereas gender and race, we're making some moves, people might argue either way around that. But because those charter marks are there, universities have to show something in regard to gender and race. Whereas with disability, I think we're lagging far behind. And it also almost feels like in the EDI space, disability is the poor cousin of the EDI, and it's usually like invisible, down at the bottom of the pile of things. Gender, race usually taking the top.
So I mean, that's interesting. So we could specifically call for an organisation, I don't know who it would be, to set up something akin to the Race Equality and the Athena Swan for disability awareness. And you're right. I mean, these badges, they are to some extent badges, and you've got to be careful that they're not just something you do a load of work and tick a box. Yeah. But it does make you think, and it does make you realise where there are gaps. And it was very interesting talking to Rachel, the lead for Athena, and she was talking to our board people committee. And obviously we got silver, but within the first sentence she was saying, yeah, but we're already working on gold. We've still got a long way to go. Now, you don't have those steps for disability, and I think it is probably time that we had something that we could work towards. And it has to be national, otherwise it's not meaningful. It has to be something that everybody wants to do. So who would we call on to set that up?
Well, I think Hamied might have some response to that, because there is work taking place in this area. This is good. What I was trying to say.
So the National Association of Disabled Staff Networks is a partner in a scheme that we're calling Realising Inclusion of Disabled Employees, so RIDE for short, in higher education.
Okay.
And so we have a group of very passionate individuals, excuse me, passionate individuals who want to formulate a way forward on equality for disabled people in higher education, disabled staff, alongside disabled students. So there's something called the Disabled Students Commitment that universities are being asked to sign up to at the moment, and there's the Student Mental Health Charter.
Yes.
But those are very focused on students, as the names suggest. But for disabled staff, again, there's nothing right now. So we are trying to formulate a kind of scheme, a framework, but then trying to avoid the pitfalls of charter marks that often
tick
happen.
Box.
Exactly.
Can be.
Where you don't just want tick boxes, but
you want real change.
Real change for the people on the ground. And we're hoping this will come through staff networks, disabled staff networks at universities through that mechanism, but with real buy-in and leadership from senior leaders at those universities.
Oh, yeah, I want to pick up another interesting point you made. We often talk about EDI rather than EDIA. I was in a school yesterday, big school, and they referred all the time to EDIA. And I think we need a slight shift in thinking, because it isn't just access in terms of disability. It's access for all sorts of reasons. I was talking to some first-year students the other day, and I said, they were talking about where they could go and study, and they were all black students, and for some reason. And I said, well, you can go and study in MECD. Oh, I don't think we'd be allowed. I said, why not? Of course you'd be allowed. Everybody's allowed. It's open. But, is that sense? Not for me. So obviously disability is one, but I think access we need to add on to EDI.
I'm glad you've said that. Nobody else has said that on this series so far. And so it's really helpful to help move the conversation forward and to think about what we're not doing. And also you've challenged us, Nancy. Thank you for that, for thinking intersectionally. It's not just looking down a single lens.
No, it's not.
Of course, we're looking at disability today for the reasons that I've explained, but everybody has multiple identities, and it's about ensuring that we all have the best opportunity we can working or studying at the University of Manchester. I don't want to spend too much longer talking about that, but we have talked a lot about the challenges and some of the opportunities. But are there any practical things do you think we could be doing to raise the issues about strength and celebrating? You used the word celebrating, which I really liked. So we're not always thinking of this particular group of people as in need. What can we be doing to really raise the profile of amazing people at the University of Manchester who happen to be disabled?
I think there's a number of ways. I think just remarking on what Nancy just said a moment ago about access and it not just being about disabled people, I think that's absolutely right. So things that we can improve in the experiences of disabled people would benefit everybody.
Yeah.
So just like a building, if you've got a staircase going into a building, you're excluding so many disabled people from getting in that building. As soon as you put a ramp on, everybody can get into that building. You're not excluding anyone. So I think that's one thing to say. The other is in celebrating disabled people. I think we've got great opportunities throughout the year to do that. We have, we have Disability Pride Month in July, I think it is, which is actually based on the Americans with Disabilities Act that came out across the pond. So we've kind of borrowed that from them. We have the UK Disability History Month between November and December, and then the International Day of Disabled People on the 3rd of December. And we try to take part in the Purple Light Up. So purple being the colour of disabled people. And their contribution.
Same as, that fits well.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the university's chosen a good colour there. So purple being a vibrant way of celebrating the contribution disabled people make, which is often hidden. We don't really see that, and we don't celebrate it enough, how much disabled people do contribute, not just to the economy, to society at large in so many ways. And it's because of being disabled, because of the conditions, because of our lived experiences, that we enrich everybody's lives, I think, by being around and by being.
So, I mean, you talked about the national sort of celebratory things, but we have a lot of things within the university, and I believe we need to just think a little bit harder about people with disabilities. So we have the Making a Difference Awards, we have the Teacher of the Year Awards, the Researcher of the Year Awards, Student of the Year Awards. We ought to be thinking, are the deserving cases not because they are disabled, but the deserving cases and they are disabled, just to sort of show that, as I said before, you can achieve great things, but it takes a lot more effort, of course. And people would think, my goodness, they did that and they're disabled, rather than they are disabled first and then they did that. So I think we could think a bit harder about how we celebrate what some of the people have achieved.
Here, Nancy.
I'm so glad you said that,
will not be
Nancy.
surprised to hear that I've been having conversations actually with the alumni office with regards to what happened to Laura Nuttall as a disabled student who sadly passed away almost a year ago now, and thinking about having perhaps scholarships.
Yes.
For people who are dealing with adversity and still achieving really highly.
And now is a good time because either at the end of this year or early next year, we'll be launching our campaign. I mean, there was a big gift announced just this week. One of our alumni who's supporting care leavers, which is amazing because, of course, they leave the care home, they've got nothing. Yeah. But to have something as a sort of scholarship program for disabled students or early career disabled staff to help them get along the way, because I'm sure that for many disabled people, there are a lot of extra costs actually as well.
Yes, absolutely.
So, as I heard from the PGRs, a lot of them can't go to conferences because they need to take a carer with them. Well, that doubles the cost. So how do we manage to get around that? And I was just thinking afterwards, is there another student or member of staff who would benefit from going to that conference, who gets a free trip in return for supporting their disabled colleague? So, it's not just paying a carer, it's paying somebody who will benefit from the trip as well.
Yeah. That's a wonderful place to almost draw a line under this conversation. Okay. Thank you so much. So we finish these conversations by each of you asking the other a question. So Hamied, I'm going to ask you first of all to ask Nancy, and then she'll reciprocate and ask one to you.
All right. Okay. So Nancy, what one thing will you reflect on as a result of this conversation?
Actually, I've got about 3 or 4, but the key one is access, I think, and I don't just mean that in access to a building, I mean it in access to everything. But I also think, sorry, I'm going to do 2 or 3 quickly.
Okay.
I think getting a national charter mark is important. I think celebrating more of the achievements of our staff who happen to have made that achievement despite being disabled, not because of. I think more celebration. I think more telling people that you can be advantaged by letting others know that you have some form of disability would be. Sorry, I could go on, but anyway, lots. Thank
We'll
you.
let you have the 4.
Okay.
Now, Hamied. Sorry, Nancy.
Yeah. So what one thing would you come away with?
Wow, I think I've been actually really happy with this conversation.
Good.
And actually the perspectives that you've brought as well, Nancy. You've been a leader for our university for so many years, and you've seen a lot of change, I'm sure, at this university, at this place. You've led it yourself, and you've seen others lead too. So I think I've been really motivated and really happy to hear your perspective, and I hope your successor will take on all the good stuff and drive that forwards as well for equality for everybody, and making this the diverse and amazing place that this university is in this great and buzzing city.
I'm sure he will, actually. We've
Yes, I
had
think
conversations
so.
about it, and it was interesting. I met quite a severely disabled member of staff who, I won't name them, but I'm sure you'll know them. They came from another university and said to me they have never seen the level of support that he found here in
Excellent.
previous universities. And I said, yeah, there's still more to do. And he said, yeah, but honestly, everything was done. You probably know who it is.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I hope that means we might see a Stephen Hawking kind of appear from our very own university.
Indeed. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Well, that's a wonderful note on which to stop, isn't it? I just want to thank both of you very much for a really open, honest, provocative discussion today, because I think we do need to sort of, ask the difficult questions to move the conversation on. So thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Hamied.
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Jackie. Thank you, Nancy.
Hamied.